So today's webinar is on the introduction to Protomatrix. I assume that everyone here today and everyone who's watching this afterwards are all really interested in becoming more effective at prioritization and becoming more efficient and being more organized. And that's sort of the gist of the responses that I saw in terms of what their goals, your goals are. So I think that resonates a lot. And so in today's webinar, what I want to do is I want to give you a very good overview of Protomatrix, and then at the same time, give you some ideas as a way on how to use Protomatrix to further your goals. And as I mentioned, this is an introduction to Protomatrix. So with that, we won't cover everything, but at the same time, hopefully it'll give you a very good it'll get you excited about what you can do with respect to Protomatrix and how it can improve your work. So let me bring this over here. So the goals, again, are one, help you understand the basics of Protomatrix. If you've used Protomatrix before, either on the web app or on the desktop app, we'll be focusing on the web apps and the Teams and Outlook integrations, and then provide you a framework to get the most out of Protomatrix with the least work. I think that the 20-80 rule applies here. So hopefully you'll use 20% of the features in Protomatrix that'll give you 80% of the value. And then finally, help you envision what your work and life success would look like with Protomatrix implemented. One of the things I've done is I've talked to thousands of customers over the past many years, and there's three challenges that I see all the time. The three challenges are: one, team members always tend to have trouble understanding what's priority right now. And what's really interesting is this problem has gotten worse rather than better. And you think that all these communication tools that we're using is actually helpful in terms of helping people stay aligned. But what I find is that more so than ever before, you have more things to do than the resources to do them. And because of that, every single day, we're actually struggling more and more to understand, where should I focus my time? Where do my team members think the priorities are for any given project? And the corollary to that is actually it becomes harder to keep track on the status of work across all these areas of responsibilities as well. So not only do you have trouble understanding what you need to work on, but of the things that you should really care about, what progress have been made, especially if you have multiple team members. And then when you're in meetings, how can you actually be more effectively and more efficiently talk about those progress? And then thirdly, communication from chat messages to emails to meeting is creating a more stressful environment with too many contexts, and context switching as well. So what that means is that, in order to know what's going on with anything, you have to open up your phone, you have to look at your email, you have to look at some other application, you have to go into your chat messaging software, and then you're spending all the time doing that, and actually more time communicating than actually time executing. So what is Protomatrix? Protomatrix is a comprehensive email priority and project management software to help teams manage emails, conduct more efficient meetings, and get real-time status updates on critical projects and priorities. So how does Protomatrix tackle these three problems that I mentioned? First, we use something called the 4-quadrant methodology, which I'll go into details further, to help promote effective prioritization. And secondly, what we do is we understand that you actually have so much data, so much work, so many different projects and so forth that you're working on. So Protomatrix provide different views that's appropriate within the context that you're working with. One of the things that I like about Protomatrix is that it's people-centric. And what I mean by that is, when you're doing something, you're doing it for somebody, typically, right? When was the last time you worked on something that wasn't actually for someone? And what I mean by that is, are you working on something for your manager, for your colleague, for a client? And so if you think about it from that perspective, a project is more than just something that you do and execute on any point in time. You have to think about the context of whatever it is that you're working on. And then finally, Protomatrix provides integrations into systems you already use, in particular Microsoft Teams and Outlook, for very, very effective email and task prioritization. So what makes Protomatrix different? First, it's the only Microsoft 365 security certified solution in both the web app, the Teams app, as well as the Outlook application. And so that makes our software a very unique choice and allowing you to go and actually manage all of those components, essentially the projects and the emails, as well as meeting communication. And we're actually leveraging AI more and more to help you achieve your goals. It's something I'm really excited about just because, everything has changed so much in the past 6 months or so in terms of how much more impact we can do for you. And we provide that people-centric collaboration, which I think is really missing in a lot of software. You don't want to be switching context just between projects. If you're in a meeting with somebody, you want to know what it is you have to do for them. And finally, Matrix is available as a SaaS solution, which is what I'll be showing today, as well as a HIPAA compliance for healthcare life sciences, as well as an Azure government cloud for state and local governments, as well as managed private Azure deployments for enterprise customers. If any of those interest you, please feel free to ping us, support at Affluence, or my email, hi@Affluence. So let's talk about the philosophy behind Matrix. There's a quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." What I like about this is it talks about how, and it's time tested in some ways, which is when you woke up this morning and you probably opened your email and you're looking at all the emails that's coming in, all of those emails are actually clamoring for your attention, right? And so they require you to look at them, and that's what the urgency aspect of it. But what's interesting is how many of those emails are actually important. And I would argue that very, very, very few. In fact, a lot of the important things you already know, you're aware of what they are, and they're sitting in the back burner, and you actually don't have the time to get to them because you're spending all your time fighting these urgency, that's urgent things that's coming up all the time. So one of the things I like to think about is, imagine if you took out a piece of paper and you start writing down everything that you have to do, everything that you have to do. And in fact, I did this exercise myself for my own personal things not too long ago. And so imagine you write that down onto a piece of paper. So you might have 5 things, you might have 10 things. But my question here is, what happens if you have to add more things? What do? Do you add at the top or do you add at the bottom? And then of those things, if you're going to choose one to work on right now, which one do you choose? The top, the bottom, or somewhere in between? And what's really interesting is that we are so list driven as a society because that's the easiest thing to do. So imagine instead that you take these, maybe let's say we'll call them 10 things that you have. And instead, I'm going to ask you to look at them from the perspective of importance and urgency. Which of those things are actually important and urgent? Which of those things are important but not urgent? And then which of those things are actually not important but urgent? And so what that means is, what are the things that's actually, if you take all of those things there and you split it into those 3 categories, and then what's left, right? So what's really fascinating is how hard this exercise is. And that's the challenge that I've seen over and over again, which is it's so easy to make the list. It is very, very difficult to go and prioritize that list. So now if you were to actually take all those tasks and you did that exercise, you would put it into this matrix instead of a list. So then in the top left, you have the do now. The do now are the things that are important and urgent. And then the things you should plan for are the important but not urgent. And then maybe you can delegate the things that are not urgent but not important. And the way you can think about delegation is not necessarily because you have a direct report. And if you do, maybe there is somebody that could do it better. And that's the point, which is there somebody else or some other resource that's better at executing some of those tasks than you? You can think of, like, for example, a restaurant is something that you're delegating to, right? You're delegating to the restaurant somebody who will cook and clean up for you. And so in some way, you're hungry, and so therefore you go and eat. And that's part of the way you can think about delegation, which is maybe there's just somebody out there that will do a better job, or a faster job, a more efficient job, or at least get it out of your mind. So now that task list of yours should fit into this matrix. And what's really interesting is this. Imagine if everything that you have is in the top left, that entire list that you wrote down. Well, if everything is important and everything is urgent, then nothing is, because you're back to square one. You have no idea what to work on. And so when I look at this exercise, one of the things that you have to constrain yourself is that no more than a quarter of the things that you have written down can be in the top left. And then a quarter of the things that you've written down is in the top right. And now suddenly you've forced yourself to prioritize. The next part of this exercise is take this piece of paper that you've just created and walk around the office and compare notes. And what I mean by that is you go to your manager and say, hey, by the way, these are my priorities. All these things that we've been talking about, what I should be working on, this is how I look at it. These are the things I'm going to focus on. These are the things I'm going to plan for next. Do you agree? And find out if you and your manager agree on all of those things. And if you do, then that's fantastic. But if you don't, then how do you identify what are the things you should reprioritize? What are the things you should drop in order to focus on what truly matters? And so you can imagine how Party Matrix forces you to do this. And the hardest part about this is that as you do that initial exercise is choosing what goes where. But that's how we create alignment. And that prioritization process is very, very crucial. So start doing that today. Even if you never use Party Matrix as a software, just doing that on a daily basis will help you truly understand what it is that you need to work on. And then the second thing is that success from Party Matrix isn't about finding what everyone agrees on. If every single person in the office, your direct report, your manager, all your colleagues agree all the time on all the priorities that you have, you don't need Party Matrix. In fact, you don't need any software. You can just focus on executing. But what's interesting is that if you start finding discrepancy on and discover the disagreements on what a priority should be, that's when you know you use Party Matrix correctly. And that's when you know we've added value. So with that, you can think of Party Matrix as a digital version of what I've just talked about. Party Matrix software, rather, is a digital version of what I've just talked about. And then the second thing is we go and we expand that further in order to bring everything together. As I mentioned, the webinar is recorded, and so afterwards it will be available on affluence.com/webinars. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into a presentation of the product itself. So here, this is, I'm going to open up Party Matrix here in the web app. So when you look at Party Matrix here, what do you see? You see the exact same 4 quadrants that I mentioned to you. So on the left-hand side are projects. You can think of projects as areas of responsibilities, right? So for example, these are an initiative that I'm working on, or this is a goal that I have. And so, for example, I have a project called My Team Priorities that I have open here. And you can see within this, I have the 4 quadrants: the do now, the due date later, the delegate, and the inbox. And so when I use Party Matrix, I have to put tasks into these 4 quadrants. I can't just go and add it to a list. And it's very, very difficult. But if you do that exercise from the beginning, then you're focusing your time on the right thing. So let's just imagine if I have a task that I want to do, which is, let's say, follow up with a webinar registrants and talk about their goals. Okay, so now that's an example of a task, something that I have to do. But one thing that I can do here too is I can also say do in 1 week. And so with Party Matrix, what's happening is that it's creating a task, but we use natural language to interpret that task for you. So because I said do in 1 week, it actually sets a due date for me automatically. And so that saves me time from actually having to go and follow up afterwards and set a due date and choose a day, etc. So I could have said due next Thursday at 2 p.m., etc. So that actually will save you a step. And so if you're using Party Matrix, I definitely recommend writing that due date immediately at the start in the task itself, because that will ensure that it's on your calendar so that you know to tackle it. So after I create a task, on the right-hand side is what I call item details. And item details is all about adding context to this task. So for example, it shows me what project it's in, because I may have multiple projects. And so with each project, you can think of it as a way to categorize these tasks so they're in the right context. And then I can star the task. If I star a task, it means that it's something that's very important. And then also down here, I have ownership. So there's always one owner. There's one owner for any task. And so when you create a task, you can assign it to a teammate, a colleague, or it defaults to assigning to you. Now, if you want to follow a task, that's what you can add followers. And so followers are people who are actually interested in tracking the progress of the task, but they themselves are not responsible for executing it. And you only want one owner, because if that's not clear, that's not set out from the very beginning, there will not be clarity on who's supposed to do what. And then next to that, you have progress, which is 0 to 100%, effort, reminder. And reminder is different from dates for one particular reason. So let me show you. Imagine you're working on something that's very, very important, and it's due in 3 weeks. If you wait for 3 weeks to come by and then you work on it, maybe it's going to be far too late, right? Imagine if it actually takes several days of work to actually get done. So what I like to do is I type down here, I say, remind me. I'll just say remind me weekly. I could have typed remind me daily or remind me in 2 days, etc. So now what I've just done is I have a task that actually is due in 1 week, but it's actually also going to remind me weekly. And if I don't get to it, the system will go and ensure that I actually work on it. And as you can see, when I actually set these reminders and I type in what's called a command here, the text turned green. That means our system is interpreting it in order to take that and help you prioritize, help you set reminders, and so forth. So that's right here is what's called item details. And then if you scroll down a little bit more, you have the note section. And in the note section, you can add subtasks, et cetera. And then finally, resources, which is documentations, presentations, emails, anything that actually is relevant to this task. And you can actually even link tasks together. And from that, you can build out Gantt charts and dependencies. So that is what item details is all about. And one thing that's really interesting about this is that you don't have to use the vast majority of those capabilities. In fact, again, going back to how do you get the most out of Protomatrix and with the least amount of work, which is one, make sure that you actually put these things in the right quadrants, and then afterwards, make sure that you set a due date. And if you do that, you actually will already take all these things that's in your mind, all these tasks that you're thinking about, concerned about, et cetera, and you put them down into a very visual way for you to see. And this is so much more powerful than a list because, again, it's all about communication, right? When you have two people with two lists and you come together and you look at it, you won't know how they think about it in terms of importance. And so I highly emphasize that you got to make sure that these things actually go into the appropriate quadrants. And so because of that, let's just say because I added this task here in the inbox, I can actually drag this over and now it's in quadrant 1, which means to me, it's a high priority task. So then now I know that anyone else who's looking at this project, they know that this is the high priority task. So what you can do next is actually you can start customizing the project itself. So let me show you what happens next, which is one, I want to go and create a new project. So I click on project here and I go create project. When you create a project in Protomatrix, you have a lot of different options. You can start with a blank project. A blank project is what I just showed you earlier. It uses the Eisenhower Matrix and create those 4 quadrants for you. But what's useful too is actually we have these things called public templates. So over the years, we've built out various templates based on the needs of different customers. And so there are some best practices as well. So if you're new to Protomatrix and you sort of want to go and look at Protomatrix as a way to do more than just task management, you can go to public templates, look at some of these other options we have. So for example, the 30, 60, 90-day plan for manager, it's just a way for you to think about how do you plan out your quarter, every single quarter, right? And so check that out. But I'm going to go ahead and create a blank project. And so I'm going to call this a test project. Oops. And so with the test project, I can add notes if needed. I can associate with groups such as departments as needed. I can choose the basic template, which I'll leave it as basic Protomatrix template. And then I can choose a color, and that's how I add a project. And so when I add a project and I go to this view right here, I open what's called the project details. So we saw the item details, and now we look at the project details. The project details allows me to start customizing this a little bit more to my liking. For example, I have the name of the project. I can star a project, and when I star the project, it jumps here to the very top on the top left here. Then you can see that this project will really stand out. And so if it's a key initiative that I'm working on, or if a project that I frequent, then that's what I want to put in the top left there. And then down here, you have members. essentially, these are team members who can see everything in this project. So the way permission works in Matrix is when you create a project here, only you can see it. But as you add new team members, they can see everything in it. And that's the point of Matrix in a team environment, which is it is a communication tool. So it's a way to communicate to everybody that these are the priorities. And so therefore, if you have a project that's very important and there are other stakeholders, make sure you add them. When you add them to that project, it allows them to see all those priorities as well. And then they can go, and when you have your meeting and so forth, you can project Matrix on the big screen and you can talk about it. And it is very, very helpful to create alignment with that approach. And then down here, you can actually customize both the quadrant names as well as the color. So you can see that I have the same terminology, do now, do later, delegate, and postpone. But what happens is, as organizations and as you use Matrix, some of these terminologies actually may change based on your own needs. So for example, engineering organization might use P1 for high priority or P2, P3, right? Instead of do now, do later, and delegate. And so Matrix offered this customization for you. One thing that's really neat about this is that once you've customized a Matrix project, you can go here and you can actually save the project as a template. And once you do, when you launch a new project, you can use your template instead. So then you don't actually have to go and customize it every single time. But one thing that's really neat about this templating system is that not only can we template a matrix, we can actually template all the tasks that's in the matrix. And so the way you can think about this is, imagine if you have a particular onboarding process for a new employee. You can go and build the Matrix project. You can add all the tasks that they have to do as part of onboarding, and then you can go and put in the appropriate quadrants and appropriate due dates. Once you save that as a template and you launch a new project from that template, all the due dates will propagate for you automatically. So you can just say, this is the start date for the employee, and all the due dates will actually get created. Extremely useful for several scenarios. Let's just say if you're a consultant and you bring on board a client, you can use that same process. Or let's say you have a particular project, a construction project, where you have, a 1 year worth of tasks, everything from documentation to getting permits, to supply chain, and so forth. So you can actually create all of those tasks, as many tasks as you need, with all the appropriate due dates and all the appropriate information. And then now you've just built a template that your whole organization can use. So that's the basics of Matrix: the projects, the task, and then all the details around that. One of the things I want to talk about, and this is something that a lot of our customers face challenge with, is emails. And so Matrix itself is just a software, but one thing that I find to be helpful is dealing with emails and ensuring that the most important emails do not fall through the crack. So how many emails did you get this morning, right? In my account on a daily basis, I get maybe 100 plus emails. And so when I start my day and look at these emails, I'm not able to get all of them, get to them and respond to all of them immediately. So I always have to go and decide, where should I spend my time? How should I prioritize the important emails so that they don't fall through the cracks? Now, if you use something like Outlook, you obviously can flag emails. The challenge with flagging emails is that if you have 5 flags emails, that's fine. But if you have 50 flag emails, how do you decide which of those flag emails to work on? And so now there's another layer of prioritization of your important emails, right? And then not only that, how do you remember when to get back to that email? Yes, you may be able to set a ping or a date on that email, but then what if you actually have to get to that email prior to the due date? Just as I mentioned earlier, the difference between reminder and due dates, right? On anything that you have to do. So here's an example. Let's say I have an email that I get in Outlook, and let's say this email is very important. So Matrix has something called the Matrix for Outlook integration. So if you go to the Outlook App Store, you can go ahead and install Matrix for Outlook. And then when you do, when I have an email, I can actually hover over this ellipsis right here. And then when I go to Matrix, I can choose to prioritize email. And so you can see that when I click on prioritize email, what it's doing is it's allowing me to capture this email as a task. I can change the name of the task. The task name itself inherits from the subject of the email, but I can go ahead and modify that as needed. And then the second thing I can do is actually I can choose what project it goes in. So for example, let's see here, we have a test project that we created, and now I can actually take this email and not just flag it, but instead capture it into the right context. Because if this was a customer email and I have a project for that customer already, the best way to put it is to put it into that appropriate project. And then I can prioritize where that email ought to be, right? Quadrant 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then not only that, I can assign this email to a colleague. Very useful if you are external facing, right? And you're getting an email from a customer, but now you need to bring in you need to bring in engineering or other stakeholders who might need to go and to see these emails as well. Otherwise, it just assigns to you, and then you can set a due date and you're able to capture that email. And so you can see that when I capture that email, I get the same item details as what you saw in the web app. And so now it allows me to go and customize this and update it as needed. The notes for the emails is right here. And then actually the email itself is linked. So then I'm able to take this email and share it with other team members. But one thing that you'll see is that after I prioritize an email in Outlook, there's a little tag here that shows that it's per matrix. And so what that means is this email is now prioritized. It's very easy for you to see that you've captured this email. One thing that's also very unique to Matrix is the ability for you to associate an email to an existing task. So again, going back to Matrix here, I open Matrix, and instead of actually prioritizing the email, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open that Matrix Outlook integration, and I can go and I can attach an email to an existing task. So you see how here I can attach it just like that. Very useful if you have again, a particular task that you're working on, and then an email comes in related to that task. And you don't want to go and create another task, but you want everyone who's working on the task to get the proper context. And so that's the scenario where you take an email and then attach it to an existing task. And when I go back to Matrix here, you can see that the email was created. And right here, it's put in the appropriate quadrants. When I go to the resource section, the email file is attached. And so other team members who's looking at this will get full access to everything that they need to know about the email. And so now you've taken an email, you've prioritized it, you're setting due date on it, and then you're inviting everybody to it. And so you're able to actually discuss about that email here in the chat section and then address that email as needed. The other thing I want to mention now is how we tie into the rest of the Microsoft ecosystem. So if you use Microsoft Teams, you can go ahead and install Matrix from the App Store. And then when you do, there's Matrix shows up here on this left side. You right click and you pin Matrix. And now what's really useful is that Matrix is there inside Teams. As I mentioned to you, one of the challenges that we see all the time is context switching. There's just so many applications, too many tabs. And so even though Matrix works really well in the web app, but if you're using Microsoft Teams, one of the things you don't want to do is have to switch context all the time. So I really like Matrix inside Teams for that reason, because when I'm chatting with somebody, I can actually just open Matrix and see everything that I have to do. As you can see, the interface looks almost identical to the web app itself. I still have my list of projects, I still have my quadrants, and within the quadrants, I still have the item and project details. So there's no additional learning curve that you have to do using the Teams application. But this is where it gets really cool, which is Matrix actually is probably one of the most integrated solution inside Microsoft Teams. So let's just say if you use Matrix in Teams, and if you go to this tab here, you can, and imagine you have a conversation with your coworker, and you're asking, hey, by the way, what are the things that I need to do for you? Or what are the things that we're working on? What's the status of task A, B, C, etc.? So when you go to this plus, you can add a Matrix tab. So what that allows you to do is you can add two things. You can add a full project. What that allows you to do is actually just include a project inside this conversation you have with a teammate. For example, let's say you might want to create a project that's with your direct reports. right? So then when you do have that particular project, you can add it here. So now you and your direct report can always see what are the things you need to work on. But instead, you can also create what's called the one-on-one view. So I've already added here, and I go to the one-on-one view. Once you add the one-on-one view, you select the person, in this case, your coworker here. And what's really powerful about this view is that it takes everything that you have to do in Protomatrix, and it shows you all the things you have in common with your colleague. So if you are working with your manager and you have 3 different projects that you're working on, you don't have to go and switch contexts. You don't have to go to Protomatrix, then open each project. Instead, this is that people-centric approach, which is it looks across your entire Protomatrix, find out everything you have to do in common with that colleague, and it shows you in one central place. It is extremely helpful because when you're having a meeting and you're trying to figure out where you should be prioritizing your time, etc., that information is here. And then the other thing is it's easy to also identify the things that are due. So you see out here, when I have something that's due, it actually shows, or overdue rather, it shows a red, right? So I can sort it and see, okay, these are the things I'm working on. This is when they're due. Is this in the right project? Is this the right priority that I'm working on? And so your meeting becomes so much more efficient because you're just able to see everything that you were assigned in one central place and then update them as needed, regardless of the project that they're in. The other thing that's also really helpful about our integration into Teams is that when you are talking to somebody and they ask you to do something, you don't even have to go to Protomatrix to actually create that task. In fact, you can just hover over the text that they sent you, click on this ellipsis, and create Protomatrix item. And so as you can see, if your manager asks you to do something, or if your direct report asks you to do something, or rather you ask your direct report to do something and then they said, hey, could you add it to Protomatrix? You can just click on that ellipsis, click on choose what project it belongs in, set the due date directly from here and create that task. So what we try to do here with the software is save you time and effort in everything from taking any communication and turn into task, and then surfacing up everything that you need to work on. So if you're looking at Protomatrix from that lens, then I think you'll find our software to be extremely helpful because we're there in the right context for you. There's a couple of other things inside Teams, and as you can see, I can actually insert Protomatrix tasks directly into a Teams conversation. And I do that simply by going down here, opening up Protomatrix, and inserting any task. And so you saw how I actually converted an email into a task, right? I can actually send that task right here in the chat itself. And now my teammate can look at this and open it and actually review it. The use case is actually pretty simple, which is you get a really important email from a third party, and then the third party asks, hey, could you look at this and so forth. So instead of just forwarding the email into your coworker's inbox, and you don't know if they're going to see it because you don't know how many other emails they have, they may miss it, etc. So instead, you prioritize that email, and then you can assign it to them, but you can also attach that task here in the Teams conversation with them, and now you know for sure that they see that email and that they're able to get to it. Very helpful when you want to make sure that important emails don't fall through the crack. So Protomatrix also has a chat bot, and you can look at the chat bot as a way for you to get reminders. As I mentioned, it is very important that you set due dates and reminders. And the way it works is that in Protomatrix, when you go to the home view, there's a section called alerts. Alerts essentially is attention needed, items that requires your attention. And so you can see here, I have an email, maybe the due date is here, it'll show up in my alert. And as I click on my alerts, it actually goes away. So instead of getting to, you can think of it as a way to get to inbox 0, right? You can get to inbox 0 on your alert. And so these are all the things that require my attention. The items that are due, the reminders that are set, items that are delegated to me, items that I'm a follower on that I got updates for. And then as you go through this, you can see each task, and then you know that you're getting things done. And so from your coworker's perspective, if they leverage Matrix correctly, when you assign them tasks, it'll show up here in the alert. And if they go through and review all of this, then they'll be able to see everything that they actually have to tackle. And then once you are done or you want to clear everything, you click on clear notification and clear all of that. And that's pretty much it at a high level on what Matrix can do, or how you can actually best leverage the basic Matrix capabilities. As you can see, I've shown you several things. One, create projects, use the right quadrant names and the right terminology for the job, right? So then you know that, hey, everything here is high priority, everything here is second, this is what we need to plan for, and so forth. And then from there, create tasks, and in those tasks, make sure you set due dates, and then install the Matrix Outlook integration, so then you can go and prioritize email, and then use the Microsoft Teams integration so that you don't have to switch contexts. One last feature that I'll show you, which is our AI capability on helping you achieve your goal. So this is called item onboarding. And the way it works is this, which is you can tell Matrix a goal that you have, and Matrix will go and build out a project for you in order for you to tackle that goal. So I just have a very simple goal here that I've created in the past, which is get a promotion to senior project manager. Now you can think there are many different goals. For example, your goal might be to improve your supply chain, or your goal might be how do I better balance my work life, right? So you can type in any goal in Matrix, and what Matrix will do is we'll leverage AI to actually build out a set of action items to help you tackle that. So since I've already ran that, I have this open here. And you can see when I actually go to this project, what's really interesting about this is Matrix went and used a very different quadrant name than do now and do later. Instead, we call it low effort and high impact, high effort, high impact, low effort, low impact, and high effort, low impact. As you can imagine, if you were to look at something like this, where you should really focus your time is still in quadrant one, right? These are the things where the low hanging fruit, for lack of better words. And then these are the things that are impactful, but actually might require a lot more resources to do. So you can think of Matrix as a way to also help you think about what are the things you need to work on in order to further what your goals are. Because, it's hard for each of us to always know what. Sorry, I'll try to say it in a different way. We tend to know what we need to work on when we think about our own task. But then what happens is we are always in the woods. And because of that, we tend to forget what are the things we can each work on to actually further our goals. And so when you think about the goal system in Matrix, it's all about ensuring that you think about your quarterly goals and annual goals and so forth, and then identifying the tasks that you need to work on for you to achieve that. So leverage this capability, because I think that's actually really, really powerful. I'm going to go ahead and send it to you in the chat here. So then you can go there and actually access it as needed. And so with that, I'm actually going to go back to the presentation real quick here. And then I want to summarize what we've talked about. So one, make sure you sign up for Matrix and use our apps in Teams and Outlook if applicable. Two, I recommend that you create at least 3 projects. A personal priorities, the things that you want to work on a daily basis. A shared team priorities, which essentially are, which is a project where you want to make sure you invite your manager or your direct reports or your team, etc. And then a key initiative to ensure that you are working on the right thing. One of the things I want to mention about Matrix is that use it to track things that truly matter, right? That's the whole point, which is to go and ensure that the team is on the same page and that everyone is working on the right things. And so if you track the right initiatives, if you prioritize the right tasks with Matrix, it will be far more helpful to you in general. And then finally, and then invite the appropriate team members and pitch to them on why it's important to focus on high impact tasks. Find the discrepancy. Find the disagreement in priorities. If you find a disagreement in priority, within the first week of using Matrix, then you're doing something right. And then create items in Matrix with due dates in the appropriate quadrants and make sure you don't drop them. That's the point as well. And then as you finish each task in Matrix, mark them as done. We actually build out records and reports on all of that for you down the road. And then the other thing is make sure you ruthlessly prioritize. Again, many of you here are here because you're looking for a better way to prioritize because, are clearly whatever it is that you're using prior may not be working as well as you'd like. And that's the truth, which is, I still constantly face challenges around prioritization because there's just always so hard to make those key decisions on where I should focus my time on at any point in time. But you have to be ruthless about it. So make sure you prioritize, make sure that you don't have too much in quadrant one, because if everything is important and urgent, then nothing is. And if you're always working on quadrant one, that means you're firefighting. So your goal is to actually have quadrant one to approach zero, and that you're spending time on quadrant two, the planning quadrant, and that you're actually appropriately allocating the resources to ensure that you meet your goal. So what should success look like with Matrix? One, it should be one central place for you to track your priorities. Everyone in the team starts to understand and are aligned on key tasks. If at any moment in time, you or your team members find that you don't know if you're working on the right thing, then that's when something like Matrix will be extremely beneficial. And my recommendation is you could even project Matrix on the big screen when you have the meetings, so then everyone can look at it and just talk about the things that matter. Because you should not be talking about quadrant 4 or quadrant 3. You should only be talking about quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. And then you can go and identify that, hey, these are the things that we should work on, but we're not, right? Again, make sure you look for the discrepancies. And then finally, and then rather repetitive procedures are templatized. So if you are investing a lot of time and effort building out and customizing Matrix and setting due dates and so forth, and it's a repetitive process, use that template system. It will save you a lot of time down the road. And then make sure that you install Outlook integration to prioritize emails. And if you do that, then I think that you'll find really good success with Matrix. You'll start not dropping any critical tasks, any critical emails. And so at the end of the day, it starts with you as a single person to use Matrix. Team success just comes as a consequence of everyone, staying aligned. But it always starts with one person, and that's you. So with that, I conclude my presentation here. I'm going to go ahead and look in the chat section to see if there's any questions. If you have any questions or comments, please send in the chat, and if appropriate, I will address them. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. So I'll send out the recording right afterwards. Thank you for the comments. Appreciate it. So the question is, does my whole team need to have Matrix for me to send tasks? And the answer is no. So technically, what you can do is when you have Matrix, you can create projects and you can assign it to them and so forth, and they can have a free version of Matrix. So if they're not using Matrix as a full-fledged software solution, they can have access to the free version. You can also send out a read-only version of Matrix to anybody as well. So Matrix allows you to send out the read-only version. You can export it as needed, but typically success with Matrix at the team level does involve having everyone be on the software because then they can actually edit priorities, they can make comments, they can mark tasks as done. And then with all of that comes the reporting aspect of it. So then if you're a manager and you have, 5 or 6 direct reports that's working with you directly, and you're assigning them tasks and so forth, as you get things done, as they get things done, you can actually track that progress. And then the second thing is that when you assign a task to somebody, you can actually go to our workload reporting and you can see if anyone is overloaded with work. It's so helpful because if are bringing on a new project and you're trying to assign tasks to one person and they already are completely overwhelmed, that won't work. So Party Matrix allows you to go and see who's working on what. And I'll show you what that view looks like here. So when I go to report here, I can actually go to workload management and I can see the number of Party Matrix action items that every person is assigned. And I can click on each of these to drill down further. So if you're trying to, ensure that everyone is on task and you want to assign them more things, make sure that they're not already completely overwhelmed. And likewise, use this to your advantage. When your manager asks you to do something and you're already completely overwhelmed, show them this and say, hey, by the way, like these are my priorities. What should I drop? What should we deprioritize? And then the other thing since I mentioned the read-only version, you can actually go to here and you can share project in read-only mode, for example. And so that allows you to share a project with somebody. You could be an external person if needed, but they can actually take a look at your Party Matrix project, and but they don't have access to editing it. So that's pretty helpful if you have an external client and you want to keep them completely informed on the progress of the work. Fantastic. Are there any other questions? Yes, you can share this video. So after this, I will upload it and then I'll send out an email. And if you were one of the registrants, then you'll get an email with the link to the recording, and then you can share that link with anybody who wants to watch it. Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate the questions. Thank you.